I'm back home, I'm back in the office, and I'm back to work after an exciting weekend in Wilmington, North Carolina for the Ironman 70.3 relay race. It was a really cool experience to participate in an Ironman for the first time, even though I was only doing the running leg, and I think it scratched the itch to potentially maybe do some triathlons in the future. Got to work on my swim and my bike though. But in that race, I was able to secure my new half marathon PR, time of 1:19:28. I've been training heavily for a sub 80 minute time, and I was able to secure it in that race. So in this video, I want to break down all those things surrounding that PR that allowed me to go out there and perform well. So the gear, the nutrition, and some of the high level training principles, as well as the strategy that I used on race day to get that PR. Now I'm going to do a separate video that's very detailed on week by week training. I'll go through all of the workouts that I did to get here, but this video is really a general overview of everything. This video is going to be focused more on the experience of that race and some of those supporting factors leading up to it. Alright guys, before we get into it, if you enjoy these training style videos, these performance oriented videos, please make sure you are subscribed. I'm going to be putting out a bunch more videos like this, and I also have a series of training principles explained simply that I'm going to be blowing up a little bit, adding some more depth to that, and I'm also cooking up some other things that I'll announce shortly. I started this channel strictly talking about shoes. We've expanded it a little bit, start talking about training more, which has been received well, so we're going to put some more investment behind that training stuff to bring you the simplest, clearest, most informative running training content out there. So thanks for all the support. Please make sure to subscribe to stay tuned for all that good stuff we got coming. A quick overview of the race and the few days leading up to it. So this is my first time doing an Ironman, as I mentioned, and it was completely different than any other race experience. From the parking to the convention to, of course, the race start itself, everything was different from a typical running race. Now, if you've never done an Ironman, you will be blown away when you go and check out one of these events, because Ironman is one of the biggest, most recognizable, most famous athletic brands in the world. You see that little logo, the little IM with the dot, you know exactly what that stands for. You know they mean business, and the Ironman organization is exactly like the athletes themselves. They're prepared, they're ruthless, they got the logistics on point, so everything surrounding the race was mapped out to a T. So we got there on Friday, we did the athlete briefing, we checked in with the team. I had my friend Nick, who was on the bike, my friend Lil, who was doing the swim, and I was doing the run. I made the 3-hour drive from Charlotte up there, and we got settled in that night, Friday, day before the race. It was a bit different from my typical race because this is the first race, at least in a year, where I had to travel to the race location. So that was a first for me in a sense, because I'm usually at home, I usually have my family, my wife and I plan out exactly what meals I'll eat. I have my water here throughout the day, just make sure I'm hydrated. I didn't have that same exact comfortable setup, so I had to be more planful. And that's my first tip for you guys here. If you are traveling for a race, make sure that you have some sort of control over what you're putting in your body at least, and over when and where you can take that load off your legs. The biggest mistake you can make when traveling for a race is standing on your feet too much the day before. Second biggest mistake you can make is not eating enough. That can usually be rectified, especially if you don't have a super restrictive diet. There's usually Chipotle or whatever around, which I actually ended up eating. But the standing on your feet one is killer, especially if you're traveling and you're not in the right shoes and you're on your feet 8 hours the day before a big marathon at the convention center. That's a no-go. So luckily I was able to check in, go to the convention center. I was on my feet for only probably 30 minutes to 90 minutes, and then I was off my feet for the rest of the day, got some work done, posted my weekend gear deal video, hung out with the squad for a little bit, and then hit the hay. Now, race morning was completely different too. If you've done a regular road race, you're probably familiar. The race will start sometime between 7 and 8 a.m., maybe a little bit later. But because this was an Ironman relay, those races take anywhere from 4 to 9 hours, depending how fast you are. They start it early in the morning, same time as a regular race, around 7 a.m. But that's the swim leg. So the swim launches at 7, and then the bike will get the next leg, and then I'm the running leg. So that meant I wasn't going until anywhere between 10:30 and 11:30. Also, because it was a rolling swim start, they put 3 athletes in the water at once every 3 or 4 seconds. That meant we didn't know exactly when Lil, our swimmer, was going to be hitting the water. And we also didn't know how long it was going to take her and Nick, our biker, to finish their segments. We knew Lil was going to be anywhere between 30 and 40 minutes. There's a bit less variability for that swim leg. It's only a 5 to 10 minute range. But with the biking, that's 90 to 100 kilometers. That could be anywhere from 2 hours, 15 minutes to 2 hours and 40, 45 minutes if Nick ended up blowing blowing up. That was the first big challenge of that morning. Was I was not in my element and I did not have all of my usual control, especially over the start time. So I was waiting in the relay handoff area for the bike to come and hand off my chip to go run for a while. Around 10:45 is when we thought he could first start arriving, and he wasn't getting there, so I was waiting until 11. I ended up going at 11:03. But that took a lot of mental toughness and focus to just be able to be locked in, not know, okay, we're gonna be starting counting down from 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 in 10 minutes. No, we can wait here for up to 30 minutes, an hour for him to come in and hand off the baton. Now, in terms of the race itself, I had a pacing strategy mapped out for this. I had a little cute Excel spreadsheet and everything, which I do before every single goal race. I'll put in my splits and I calculate how long it should take me to finish each section of the race in order to get that goal time. So my general plan going into it was to hit the first 4 miles at around 6:10, the next middle 6 miles at 6:06, which is the average pace you need to go sub 120, and the final 3 miles at 6 minutes flat. Now, in training, I'd hit a lot of my half marathon pace workouts around that 6 flat minute mark when I was really feeling good about 3 to 4 weeks ago. I was going even sub 6 at the last 2 miles of a lot of those runs and throwing some sub 6 miles in there. So that was the plan. Start off slow and negative split it, because in the past, that's what's been most successful for me. When I got my 1:23:09 half marathon PR a few months ago, I used that same negative split strategy. I actually started that race around 6:40 minutes per mile and then ended at around 6 flat for an average pace of somewhere in low 6:20 range. Now, with the negative split strategy, the biggest challenge for me is holding back in those first few miles. There's so much adrenaline and excitement out of the gates, and that was particularly true for this race, where that Ironman experience is just so amped up. There's so much pomp and circumstance surrounding it. I also had a ton of friends and supporters, other people who were doing the race that I knew. So when I came out of the gates for the running section, people were just screaming, and then the whole first mile and a half was flooded with supporters. So I was so amped up out of the gates. I did manage to hold myself back. I went 6:04, 6:05 that first mile. If I didn't have it in my head that I was doing this negative split strategy, I probably would have ended up going 5:55 or something absolutely ludicrous. So I'm really glad that I was looking at my watch, holding myself back a bit, but that was still faster than I had anticipated. Next mile, I did go closer to that 6:10 range. I came in around 6:11, 6:12. Mile 3, 6:07, and mile 4, 6:11, 6:12 again. So at this point, I was getting in my head, which I always do when I use this negative split strategy. I always get in my head, I'm going too slow, I'm not gonna make it, I'm gonna slow down, how am I gonna crank it up to race pace that I need to hit? But I was able to do that and slowly started dropping the pace, 6:09, 6:08, mile 5, mile 6. Now this is when it really got challenging. Usually in these half marathons, there's a point around mile 3 to 5 where I lock into that pace. I start to get more into a rhythm, and it's not necessarily that it gets easy, but I'm just flowing. I never hit that flow stage in this race, and I was battling mentally the whole time to just keep that pace up. Now, that's why you do race pace workouts. It's so your body can learn the pace and so it can feel like second nature to just get into that rhythm. I did race pace workouts every week for the past month and a half, 2 months, but for some reason, it just never felt easy. It never felt comfortable. It either felt like I was holding back or pushing hard, and that's just gotta be, sometimes it's not your day to feel like you're gonna have a good race. I was still able to secure that PR, but the big learning here is just trust the training. It did not feel right mentally, it did not feel right physically, but I put in that work and my body was able to sustain that effort because I just gutted it out. I leaned on my training and I focused on hitting that pace, staying within the range that I prescribed going into it. Now for the first half of the race, my average pace, my watch said, was 6:08. Now this is where you gotta be a little bit careful because what the watch tells you isn't always the same thing and isn't always as accurate as the course. This is an Ironman, and like I mentioned, they are on point with their logistics. So of course their mile markers and the way they have everything mapped up is gonna be exactly accurate. My watch said I was going a little bit slower than I was in reality. So my watch was making miles a little bit longer than they were on the course, which had my average pace at around 6:08 when in reality it was probably around 6:05, 6:06 on the Ironman course. So because I thought I was a little bit too behind when I came to mile 6 and I started having those doubts creep in, the course was an out and back and there was a turnaround at mile 6, and I came out of that turnaround like a bat out of hell. I don't know what got into me. I just felt possessed and I dropped the pace to 5:55, 5:50. And my split for the 2 to 3 miles there in that middle section was 5:55 according to the Ironman app. They were tracking me. And according to the splits I have here, mile 7, 6:02, mile 8, 5:55, and mile 9, 6:04. That was the section of the race that probably should have been at the end if I were trying a negative split, but I thought I needed to make up some ground. And so I started my push and my kick a little bit too early, and I went a little bit too hard in this middle section. It ended up paying off, but that is a cautionary tale because what happened in the next few miles was not pretty. Now, once I got to mile 9 and I was still around that 6:08 pace, at least according to my watch, I thought I was in the range for making it. I didn't know. All I was thinking was just get through it. I saw that mile 10 marker, and about 2 minutes later, everything just felt off. My stomach started burning. I started cramping in my diaphragm and abdomen, and the pace just got super hard to maintain. If you've ever hit the wall in marathon training, or if you've ever hit the wall in a real race, you know this feeling where it just feels like you can't kick. It feels like you can't push through. Everything is molasses. Everything is just utter pain. At this point, I wasn't even saying anything to myself. My legs just kept moving. My wife asked me afterwards, how did you make it through that section when it got tough? I have no idea. I didn't have any mantra. I didn't have any secret thing that I was pulling on from within. All I was thinking about was, I do not want to be in this much pain again. And I know if I don't make my PR, I know if I don't make my goal on this race, I'm going to toe the line again November, December. So let me just see what I have. Let me just go all out in this race, which I haven't done in a while. All out at this point, I'm at a 6:13 mile at mile 10, then a 6:17 and a 6:19. So the pace dropped considerably at that point. My heart rate also came down a bit. I was hovering around 180 for most of this, which for me is really high. Dropped to 176 for that stretch. I just couldn't sustain that faster pace. I was pushing near my lactate threshold, and I paid for it there. But because of that training, I was able to lean on some of that threshold work I did. I was able to lean on a lot of that race pace training I did, which made my floor pace around 6:20, which was much better than my floor pace in a previous race, which I blew up in earlier this year. My floor pace was around 6:50. So once I got to that mile 12 sign, I knew it was in me to kick it home. There was a ton of excitement on that last mile, and I just gave it everything I had, put down a 6:04. There was one point where I saw 119 flip on my watch, and I didn't see the finish line yet. I got a little bit nervous. Turned out it was just around the corner, but I ended up crossing in 119.28 for a 32-second cushion for my goal. Now, my takeaway from this is strategy is great going into it, but sometimes the environment is going to dictate how you race. The course said rolling hills, and it wasn't necessarily rolling hills, it was gradual, just up, up, up. Mile 11, I had a huge hill, also a gust of wind. I was cramping. That's when it really got dark. And so if I had stuck to my original strategy where I had to go 3 6 flat minute miles at the end to get that PR, to get that goal time, I likely wouldn't have gotten it. So it turned out pushing a little bit early in that middle section paid off, which is why it's good to know the course beforehand. That would have been possible through a bit of research before, but sometimes you also just gotta feel it out on race day. And for me, this race was just a grind fest. I came to accept that around mile 2 or 3. I was like, I know it's not gonna get easy today. I'm just gonna have to gut it out, do whatever I need to do to get my goal. And that's what ended up happening. Some races are a breeze. The last time I got my PR, it was a local race, much smaller, much less excitement and energy surrounding it. So I was able to be more focused. My average heart rate for that one was actually around 173 versus this one was 178. So much higher effort to secure this PR than the last one, but that's why you put in the training. Also wanted to talk about my nutrition strategy here. Going into it, I knew I was gonna use the Morton gels because that was gonna be on the course. So for the past 2 weeks leading up into it, I was practicing using the Mortons on my training runs. Those things are honestly pretty disgusting to get down. They're not like a goo or a Huma or a Spring where it's liquidy inside that packet. It's a gel. It looks like a hair gel and it's congealed and it's solid. You have to kind of chew it to get it down. It's not the most pleasant, but they do have just straight carbs, taste like straight sugar, about 20-25 grams of carbs in one of those. So I did my normal breakfast of 2 pieces of toast with peanut butter. Then I had one of the Morton drinks, which the Morton 100. And then I had 2 of those gels before the race. I didn't eat enough before the race. There were some other runners waiting in the relay area who had solid food. They had bananas, peanut butter, and jelly sandwiches. So I just went up to them. I was like, oh man, you guys are so smart. Just making a passing comment, you guys are so smart for bringing the solid food. And one of these women offered me a bag of pretzels. So I took that bag of pretzels. Also took a big gamble because I've, again, never eaten anything like that before a race. But it ended up paying off. It settled my stomach because I felt hunger pains, and you do not want to be hungry going into the race. Probably put down like 20 to 30 of those pretzels. Shout out to Roll Gold. Extra salt, extra electrolytes, extra carbs right before that race start. During the race, I had another gel at mile 2 or 3, and then a final gel with caffeine at mile 6 or 7. Now, I hadn't trained using the Morton caffeine gels, and I've never done that on race day. I've never used something that I didn't train with. I really felt like I needed that last boost to get me through to the finish line, and they were handing out the caffeine gels with the regular ones, so I decided, let me just shoot my shot on this caffeine gel for the last leg of this race, see how it goes. Maybe that's what caused me to blow up and cramp in the last few miles. Maybe it was just the massive effort I'd sustained for that middle section. But I think my gamble paid off because I was able to dig deep for that last mile to make sure I went under 6:30 to get that PR. I also did water throughout. This race was great because they had aid stations with the gels, Gatorade, Pepsi, water at every single mile. So I had my choice of where I wanted Gatorade, where I wanted water. I took Gatorade once or twice, and then I took water maybe 3 or 4 times. I just grab and go, just a few sips and then threw it down. I don't get the whole little carton down, but it is good to just get those little sips throughout. The weather was about 55 to 60 degrees, so perfect. Beautiful day, crystal clear blue skies. Earlier in the week, there was predicted rain. I was glad that didn't happen. So it was ideal race conditions. Wasn't too hot, so I needed to pound a ton of electrolytes. And there was no muscular cramping that I endured during that race. Just that kind of weird stomach cramping, which is probably from me going out a little bit too hard in that middle section. The day before a big race, I'm usually pretty nervous. I usually can't get a ton of food down, but I went 2 bagels in the morning. Just throughout the day, I had 2 Tailwind recovery drinks because I did my shakeout run the day before. My one key mistake was that I didn't eat lunch before I got to the convention center, and I arrived around 1, so I ended up having lunch at 3:34. I grabbed Chipotle, but I knew that I wouldn't be starting the race the next day until 10, 11, so I wasn't too worried. So I pushed my dinner a little bit later than I would have the night before race. Had that around 8:39. And my pre-race dinner is always spaghetti with red sauce that has Beyond Meat in it. Shout out to Beyond, that's a logo on my hat here. Just a solid mix of carbs and protein. My body digests Beyond very easily, so I know I'm not gonna have any weird GI issues the day before, and pasta is pasta, no challenges with that. My one tip for pre-race nutrition is do not be hungry the day before. That's the biggest thing you can do. Just don't be hungry. Start your carb load if you're gonna do that 2 or 3 days out. And the day before, just try to get in as many calories as you can. Don't introduce any new foods that you haven't tried before, but just don't be hungry. That's the death sentence right there. If you go into a race under-fueled, it's not gonna turn out pretty. Last thing here, I briefly wanted to touch on what gear I used. For shoes, I used the Nike Vaporfly Next% 3. I will do a full video reviewing these after using them for the race. Quick thoughts are they're a little soft for my preference actually, and I might enjoy the Vaporfly 2 just a tiny bit more. Definitely not as firm as the Saucony Endorphin Pro 3, definitely not as stable as the Saucony Endorphin Pro 3, but it got the job done and a very comfortable shoe. I think this is probably the ideal shoe for the marathon distance. I want to try the Hoka Rocket X2 against this, see if that's maybe a better half marathon shoe for me. I'm not sure if I found my perfect half marathon shoe yet, but this is a solid one. I wouldn't go with anything other than this until I've put significant miles on something else, because the Vaporfly has always gotten the job done for me. Secured every single one of my PRs. For shorts, I use the Tracksmith shorts. I think they're the Van Cortlandt ones, 5 inches. They're not super short. They're also not super tight. I like a bit of a looser fit. I don't like racing in half tights. I think it's a little bit too runnery for me. But I love those Tracksmith shorts. They're that baby blue like I'm wearing here, one of my favorite colors. They're just light, they feel free. They're not great for putting gels in the pocket, so I wouldn't have worn them if I knew I was gonna have to carry gels that day. But because they were gonna have those Mortons out on the course, I was like, let me use my favorite Tracksmith shorts, can run free in them, not be weighed down by any gels. For shirt, I wore a classic Nike racing shirt. It's very light, easy to pin the bib on. I think I got it for like 15 bucks on sale at Fleet Feet last year. I'm not too particular about racing shirts. If it's in the summer, I won't wear one. All that matters to me is there's no chafing on the nipples, and there's no chafing on that one. I actually got a very expensive District Vision racing singlet, and that one chafed me terribly in my first half marathon that I did this year. So that one was a no-go. Nike, you got the stamp of approval. For socks, I did the classic Features light cushion socks. Those are my go-to. I won't wear anything else for race day. Very comfortable, very lightweight, just perfect fit. And they have that tab out in the back which protects your Achilles heel area so you won't get any rubbing from the shoe. And for hat, I wore a Nike hat. Nike has some great running hats. This one was branded with my gym, Train Matthews. That's the group that I ran this race with. Nick is the owner of the gym. He was the biker. Lil also goes to the gym and she's a swimmer. So I had my Nike Train branded hat. Most important thing with gear is not gonna make the race, but it will make you feel good. And you wanna be putting on what's gonna make you feel strong, what's gonna make you feel powerful, what's gonna make you feel like a boss going into that race. Again, it's about controlling what you can, controlling everything that's outside of the variables that you can't control. And I'll do anything to make sure that I'm in control and in the zone going into the race. For me, that meant doing some pretty wild things, like I was rapping to myself in the little relay race area. I was rapping some ESTG, just dancing around, getting into the zone, because I'll usually throw on some ESTG in my headphones about 10 minutes before the race. I couldn't do that at this race, so I said, you know what? I know the song by heart in my head. Let me just rap and dance to myself. Looked like a madman, but it got me in the zone and I was ready to go. So if you've watched this far, I don't know, you deserve a medal or something. Thank you for supporting my channel. I'm gonna do that full week by week training breakdown so you can see all of the key workouts I did, peel the layers back on some of the mileage, and I'll let you know what worked for me in the training, what I would improve for next time, and how we might implement some of that into your training moving forward. Thanks so much for watching. I will see you tomorrow.